welcome to the spring meetings. It's nice to see so many friendly faces and old dear friends today here in Paris. We are going to have an amazing week. We're glad you're here. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our idea or idea, depending on if you're speaking French or English, how we pronounce it, breakfast. So it's always wonderful to have everyone here to do our 3G plus diversity breakfast. We celebrate diversity here. I know it's not popular in the United States to say these words anymore, but that's okay. We can say it here in Paris. Yeah. It's a bit challenging times, you know. I also am running the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics in Washington, and so we're all having to adjust to these new times. And the language that we use, in fact, language is powerful. Words are very powerful. And we're having to adjust a bit to that in Washington as well. If you're reading the press, you understand how challenging it can be to talk about diversity in these times. So we welcome the dialogue here, and we're looking forward to it. It's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Ashmimri, who is our Vice President for Diversity here at the IAF. She's going to moderate our session this morning. So Michelle, without further ado, please come on up. Yeah.
It's good to be here. I'm glad we're still discussing diversity. I think it's very important while things are changing around the world. The good news is a lot of countries are still committed to diversity, and so we would like to take this opportunity to address diversity from different perspectives and look at some of the activities from my colleagues here, who I will give them a little bit to introduce themselves. So with that, I would like for each of you to introduce yourselves, please, and give a little bit of a flavor for what diversity means for you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole, and I'm the Executive Director of the Space Generation Advisory Council. For those of you who don't know what SGAC is, we're the biggest organization for students and young professionals who are interested in space. Currently, we have over 35,000 members in 165 countries, so I would say we take diversity pretty seriously, and we try to be present in as many countries and regions as possible. In terms of what diversity means to me, I think it's a really tough question. It means very different things to very different people. Let's say in my personal life, I would say I have a pretty diverse background in the sense of non-traditional background, a person who is coming from a country where space basically doesn't exist, and that would be Bulgaria. And I, was studying psychology, and getting into space was, for me very, very hard. And in terms of how I did that was really through SGAC. So that comes, my second point about diversity is about recognizing differences in people, be it geographical, gender, or whatever it may be, and making sure we give as many opportunities as we can for those people to grow, foster their talent, and become something that they wouldn't have dreamed about.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Amal Al-Banali. I'm the Chief of Strategic Planning and Projects Management at the Bahrain Space Agency, and I'm also the IF VP for Workforce Development and Space Education. So I'm glad to be here and to talk about diversity, because, as my colleague just mentioned, it means a lot different to different people. But from my perspective, I would say that diversity means recognition and valuing the background, the expertise of every individual and what they can bring into the table. So diversity is very important for the humanity, because at the end, it is what they are willing to give and bring in terms of different ideas, innovation, fostering collaboration, partnership, and at the end, also helping the decision-making process as well. For the space industry, I think this is very important, because at the end, for the teams that are shaping the humans' future, they need to be from diverse background and expertise in order to come up with new solutions for the challenges that we are facing every day.
Thank you so much. I would like to point out that this panel is mainly women. I would have hoped that we would have some diversity on our panel. But last year we had a 50-50, so it's good. So the next question I have for you is, So there's a bunch of ways that you can employ and promote diversity. The active approach involves implementing measurable initiatives, organizing workshops, and enacting policy changes, while the passive approach depends on natural changes in existing frameworks to promote inclusivity without direct action. What is your approach, and what makes you believe in this, that your approach is effective?
Okay, it's a loaded question. For me, I would say that SJC really takes an active approach. We have 5 main pillars, and one of them is project groups. We have created an entire project group which focuses on gender equality and diversity, and within that, we tackle these problems. I think back in 2019, SGAC started the One Giant Leap initiative, which is directly designed to really be tackling those issues, doing research on those topics, because I feel that this is a topic that isn't very closely researched, so we don't actually know what the effects are of having more inclusive, mindset, community in general. So this is what the project group does. And along with that, we organize events which are directly related to those topics, so diversity and gender equality, not only in the workspace but also at an educational level, scholarship level, and really every aspect of your career journey. We personally have seen a lot of benefit from that. I think the project group has done fantastic research, a lot of it indicating that the more diverse mindset you have, the more creative your team becomes, which is really, really fantastic. And we really try to implement a lot of changes within SGAC based on the recommendations that they have provided. I did want to share one example, which is directly related to another of our biggest pillars, which is scholarships. A lot of you may know that scholarships are extremely important to students and young professionals because it gives them direct opportunity to get engaged with the professional workforce, attend events, and really showcase themselves. And I think back in the day, it really wasn't considered the aspect of geographical diversity and making sure we give opportunities to underrepresented regions, underrepresented communities. And we've really changed the way we evaluate scholarships to make sure we are more inclusive. We take that into account. So to give you a basic example, if you're evaluating candidates, let's say from the US, compared to, I'll use Bulgaria because I feel comfortable using that, there's going to be a drastic difference in their background, in their CV, and the experience that they have, purely because in the US, let's say, the sector is so developed that you have so many opportunities to engage with space, so many opportunities to go to conferences. So realistically, when you're applying for, let's say, scholarship opportunities, the likeliness of you shining through just because you have more experience or have had more opportunity to make use of that experience is going to be quite clear, as opposed to somebody who's living in Bulgaria and would quite literally have to pay thousands of dollars to go and attend that conference. So we started taking that into account and kind of having a point-based system where you're kind of adding points to the applicants who have, let's say, less opportunity to engage with space, and really taking that into account. And I don't want to really extend my answer, but I would have a second point here, that it's also very important to look for potential. And this is why we don't just look at CVs, but we also look at ideas. So we ask applicants to kind of present an idea of what they would like to do in the future, because again, it kind of goes it goes the same. Those who have had, let's say, opportunity to have better education will clearly have better written CVs, better written recommendation letters from, higher institutions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they would have more creative ideas. So that's something that we take into account as well. So with that, I would say we really try to take an active approach and really consider applicants and consider our members from different viewpoints to make sure we can be as inclusive as possible and give the opportunities to the right people. And again, a very important point, that's not to say that we want to give opportunities to applicants who perhaps don't deserve them.
So personally, although the passive approach seems more peaceful and depends on the status quo, but I would rather go with the active approach because at the end we need some sort of framework that will align our objectives and goals towards having diversity in place. So in terms of my role as a VP, to ensure that we have young professionals working side by the expertise and the more experienced people, I think we need to have set rules to make sure that there is a good representation of both categories, and also not to forget about the students. So if we depend solely on passive, we might not achieve this goal. So we can work into hybrid mode, but at the end we will need the active approach from my perspective. When it comes to my work under Bahrain Space Agency, thankfully, in our community, we don't have a big issue when it comes to having diversity due to our culture or even our religion. There is a respect for both genders when it comes to living or working. And we can see that in BSA, as thankfully back in 2022 we had the privilege to win the IF 3G Diversity Award, which is a testimony that the agency has achieved a good representation of gender equality, and also to engage young professionals when it comes to space activities. So to summarize, I would rather go with the active approach just to ensure that we have a framework that we can work with in order to ensure that there is no underrepresentation of any category of audiences or entities within the team that we have.
Thank you so much. It seems like we're all in agreement because I am not for the passive approach. I am for definitely active approach. And as the VP for diversity initiatives at the IAF, that was my processes. We tried to implement the survey to get active responses from members and non-members to gauge and measure what's going on in diversity in the space sector, and how can we push forward, how can we make them commit to KPIs for the next years. And that will be actually our discussion later today at the committee meeting, to kind of push for the next round of the survey, which is going to be upgraded to include KPIs that each organization will set. So truly believe in an active, not a passive approach on my side. Thank you so much. And it seems we share that same mentality. My next question is, what unexpected challenges did you encounter when putting diversity policies into practice within your organizations or within other roles that you played?
Oh, I would say a few. I think one of the biggest one for me is that whatever policy you put in place is not going to apply to everybody. So I already gave the example of the policy we put in place for the scholarships. And there comes the big issue that this doesn't apply for everybody, and you cannot judge each candidate based on, let's say, their geographical diversity, specifically for the point system. For example, you can have, let's say, even, again, a candidate from Bulgaria who has had, let's say, the chance to make use of a lot of opportunities and really have a fantastic background, CV and application. And then comes the ethical question, then should I be adding more points to their application just because they come from that country? And then opposing to, you can have an applicant, let's say, from the US who's completely different background, let's say in medicine, hasn't had a chance to engage with the space sector, and then you ask yourself, well, should I be really deducting points just because of where they come from? So I think that's one big challenge, that you really try to have these policy to benefit candidates, to promote diversity, to make sure you're more inclusive, to make sure you're giving these opportunities. And then comes the challenge that, again, that doesn't apply to everybody. So we, of course, consider each applicant on their own and make sure we take these things into account. But I would say these challenges would apply to any policy. Anything you try to implement is not going to be applicable to the wider population. And I think that's something we also need to be aware of and have that consideration, that whatever you try to do in terms of policies and regulations and make sure it becomes more of a regulated aspect in your processes, ultimately for me, it's not going to be as effective or it's not going to work unless you're considering each person on an individual case by case.
So under my role in Bahrain Space Agency, I don't think that we faced any challenges when it came to implementing diversity. Thankfully, the Bahraini community is well educated in terms of having equal chances for both females and males. We have the Supreme Council for Women, which is headed by Her Royal Highness, the wife of His Majesty the King. So she's a biggest supporter for inclusion of females when it comes to having female leadership and representing Bahrain in high-level meetings. I think me being here today is also a testimony for encouraging females to be involved in the space sector. In terms of students and universities, we have a lot of females graduating from STEM field, and actually they are exceeding male students. I think the education itself, the education system is very strong when it comes to informing the students of their career choices and what to study when it comes to the future of the career. So most of our students, when they are in the high school, for example, they really know where to go to, and we noticed this when we did a lot of awareness sessions to make them aware about space and the application it has to give. When we started, space for Bahrain was only about sending astronauts to the moon or to the ISS. They did not know anything about satellites or its applications. They had only few information. So looking at Bahrain today, I think we came a long way. Lots of our students are highly encouraged to go into that field. They always ask us questions. Even me personally, the parents call me and ask, what shall I tell my kids to enroll in order to work for BSA? So in terms of BSA, I don't think there had any issues when it comes to having policies, because at the end, the community itself, the Bahraini community, was already establishing it on the bigger scale. Under my role as a VP, and as I am a new VP, I cannot say that there are currently any challenges. But when it comes to selecting the awardees, I think we need to emphasize on having diverse winners to make sure that everyone has a chance to participate into the IF activities. So thank you very much.
I wanted to actually bounce off something you said. You mentioned having the experience that males and females are equally, let's say, represented, have similar opportunities. And I wanted to actually bring that up as another challenge. I know that's not the point of the panel, but at least that hasn't been my experience. And I think it's quite relevant to the question you asked. And again, relevant to providing, let's say, opportunities when they're needed. At least in my experience, and I would say that comes also from my background in psychology, men and women think fundamentally different, are kind of wired in a different way. And at least I have personally noticed that they need different types of mentorship. And mentorship is really a vital part of them making use of that opportunity as much as they can. I can't really speak on behalf of our members and different people, but I can speak from my own perspective that at least in my role as executive director, when I first got this position, it also comes with a lot of pressure and expectations. And I really needed that mentorship to grow into the role and to be asking those questions. Oh, can I really reach out to that person? Can I do this? Can I do that? As opposed to maybe some of my colleagues who don't necessarily ask these questions, but ask different types of questions. So for me, that difference has been really noticeable, that I might have certain, let's say, anxieties or worries that perhaps my colleagues might not have them, but they have them in a different sense. And I've really noticed that even when we work with our members, with scholarship winners, whoever it may be, I notice a difference of advice giving that they might need and support that they might need. So I would say that's another consideration we need to have and we need to be aware of. And again, it's on a case by case basis, but it's important to consider.
Totally agree.
Thank you. I think we all agree that definitely there is differences in how you interact and how men and women really approach certain situations. In my case, as when we were setting up to do the survey, obviously we did it in good intention to be very inclusive and so forth, but then you get bombarded with, you're trying to be inclusive to every type of group, and then you're like, oh, there's too many items that you need to put there, and I don't want to overwhelm people, and then they don't want to take the survey. So we had that issue where people were like, well, no, you didn't consider this, and you didn't consider that, when we're doing it as a committee. So it was kind of great to have a diversity within the committee for people to point out, like, nope, you got to add more of this, but then all of us to agree we cannot have bombardment, otherwise we will fail. Initially. So we have to do it in baby steps. And that's why every year we decided we will make it more and more robust and try to collect feedback and then increase the types of groups that we will target and so forth. So I felt that was one of the challenges, is you want to tackle it, but you want to be fair, but then you don't want to be excessive in the questioning. And you don't want to put certain cultures in a position where they feel they're, you know what, I'm not going to participate because culturally I can't respond to these questions. And so you have to be very tactful in how you do that. And that's my experience with some of these issues that arise as a result of trying to be inclusive and diverse and trying to be fair to everyone at the same time, trying to make sure that you're not forgetting any other group. So my next question is, what role do you think diversity leaders should play in enhancing inclusivity in the space industry?
Again, I would probably mirror the answer I gave before. I would say an active role. Leaders need to be aware of those issues and really proactively try to make and implement those changes, and be really understanding perhaps when their vision doesn't work. I think I don't know how much I would define myself as a leader, but let's say certain changes I have tried to implement have kind of backfired sometimes, and you take it a little bit personally, and you're like, no, this should definitely have worked. I saw it as a vision, and then it doesn't work because there's too many considerations that you cannot think of every single angle. And you mentioned that different religions, different cultures, different people, there's bound to be a case for and a person for whom whatever you're trying to implement doesn't work. So trying to really take that lightly, at least for me, and trying to change the policies and regulations you're trying to implement and make sure they really are as best as they can be. And kind of realizing, at least for me, that taking an active approach doesn't really mean that you're going to have the answer right away. For me, it's really a process and kind of a progress throughout time. And that's why we've tried to establish those structures like the project group, especially different task force, and have these considerations even in our bylaws, to make sure that this is something that is done throughout time and is not just one person coming and trying to force it down on people, because at least for me, that's also not a very positive thing, trying to force diversity and trying to force certain regulations. It's never going to be positive. People are going to get frustrated. So it has to be done slowly with time to ensure that it's also done in a sustainable manner.
I think you didn't leave me anything to say. Well, leader should lead, right? So I think a leader should lead by example. The diversity should be a culture thing rather than a one-person thing. So the leader should show the team that he or she is supporting diversity and inclusion, and also walk the talk, as we say usually. So if the leader is a man, then he should support the other like ladies or younger ones if he's old, and vice versa. This should be transferred to the second and third level as well, because at the end, if only the leader is the one who's doing all of these diversity supporting and the team is not embracing it, then we wouldn't have this culture of having diversity inclusion in a lower level. So apart from having policies and the issues that we usually have when implementing them, we need to have a practical way of showing how we are supporting diversity and inclusion in our daily life, not only at work. And I believe leaders should also listen, because without active listening, they wouldn't know that there is a problem. They have to understand the needs, the requirements of the members, and then act towards delivering their needs. They need to encourage, they need to support as well. So they have a lot of work to do. But again, I don't think it's a one-man show. It should be a culture. It should be an environment that is supporting the diversity. So there is a lot of work among the leaders to spread the knowledge about diversity and inclusion. But at the end, it will have a ripple effect. The moment that the leaders can embrace diversity within their community, then all the newcomers to that team or that organization, I believe that they will also embrace the same system.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. And I think one level is that leaders must have self-awareness and awareness within their organization. So at times I find language is very important. And so I find myself in certain meetings, especially with other leaders in the room, and I catch each one when they use non-inclusive language. And then I immediately text HR, who's sitting across from there, and the head of HR. I'm like, please note, they are using non-inclusive language. So this means you need to start having a workshop to make sure that they are aware that they cannot use non-inclusive language. And then I literally have these conversations at almost every meeting that we have, because some people are just talking and they're not really fully aware of what they're saying, and they end up saying non-inclusive or using non-inclusive language. So that to me is important. The other thing is encouragement. So I find that the junior level individuals, especially women, tend to be a little bit more reserved, and I constantly find myself pushing them to speak, to be a speaker at an event. I'm like, oh, hey, there's an opportunity. I want you to be a speaker. And they're like, oh, no. I'm like, yes, it is a great opportunity. You need to try it. So then you have to constantly try to mentor, push, even if it's not your role to mentor. Sometimes you kind of have to push people to be visible, to make a statement, to have their opinion heard. And so I think those are very small changes that a person can make within an organization that have a very long-lasting effect. So my next question is to you, Amal. So in the National Space Science Agency, responsible for space science programs of Bahrain, is a relatively young entity. And so can you discuss the importance of diversity in the early development of an organization?
So the National Space Science Agency, or after it has been issued by His Majesty, the Bahrain Space Agency, just on March 17th, as a young entity in space, I think it is very important to have diversity from early stages. It is very hard, as my colleague Nicole just mentioned, to embrace and implement new policies. So imagine if you have a bigger organization and then you want everybody to works toward inclusion and diversity where they didn't implement it earlier. It will be very hard. But if you start from the beginning, from just being a young organization, it would be very easy to embrace it by a smaller team and then expand with the new joiners. So diversity should be there. We can have the active approach in the beginning for the young space agencies. And then I think by time it will become a passive approach once it is embraced in the organization. And I think also the space agencies need to focus on having equal opportunities in everything. I mean everything, when it comes to leadership positions, when it comes to training opportunities, when it comes to representation, for example, in meetings. They should take this into consideration, even if they are just an emerging space agency, because this is what is going to be defining the person or the individual who's belonging to that agency. If, for example, a young lady, let's say, just joined the space agency and she was conservative and she didn't have the chance to go abroad or represent her agency, then this wouldn't give her the confidence into becoming a better person and influencing and shaping the space strategy worldwide. Similarly for young men as well. So I believe that diversity is very important at the very early stage of any emerging or young organization. It's easier to embrace, it's easier to work with, and then we'll leave it to the culture to teach the newcomers to work as the previous workforce has been working.
Thank you so much. My next question goes to you, Nicole. In your capacity as director of SGAC, what advice do you have to organizations who seek to be inclusive and have an inclusive environment and to attract, retain young people in the space industry?
Yeah, I would say kind of consider it from different viewpoints. I think what you mentioned, surveys and having metrics is very, very useful, but also to me, experience is probably the most useful. Having that experience, going through it yourself, kind of learning as you go is probably the most valuable thing you would have as a leader, because you see for yourself why certain things work, why certain things don't work, and kind of not having the fear of just trying new things out. I think it's something we've tried to touch upon in this panel, but especially as somebody who's young, you know, going into a leadership role, you have a lot of fears like, can I really say this? Can I do this? It's also something that Clay mentioned at the start. You know, we just came back from Washington and the word diversity there was almost forbidden. So in a position as a young leader, you kind of think to yourself, okay, if I then have an event and set a panel for diversity or discuss this topic, is it going to negatively impact my organization? Is it going to negatively impact myself? And I'm sure a lot of you in this room, what we're talking about here is nothing new, but perhaps the situation we are in right now, it's definitely new, because you have to put almost kind of weigh your priorities with your organization's priorities, and you have to strike that balance to, am I speaking on behalf of myself? Am I speaking on behalf of my organization? In times where your words are so harshly scrutinized that even saying the smallest thing can be so drastic. So my advice would be, and it's something maybe that I'm not really taking my advice, but trying not to have that fear and kind of speaking your mind, because this is a topic that is very important. So in times where perhaps not that we're trying to suppress it, but I would say especially in the media or in certain regions, it is not openly talked about just because of the fear. I think as leaders, it is our job to keep talking about it and keep having those conversations. Otherwise, that active approach is not going to be so easy to take. I think at a certain point, we might find ourselves in a position where you're the only one fighting that battle purely because it's not okay or not convenient to be expressing certain opinions. So I think there's a lot of practical advice in terms of surveys, in terms of being active, having webinars, events, certain regulations that can promote diversity, and then on the other side, making sure that there's awareness regarding that and not just doing it quietly on the side, regardless of circumstances at the moment.
Thank you. With that, I want to open it up for the audience to ask questions, if you have any questions.
So I'm going to ask a question now. It's my prerogative. So, working with an international organization, but also leading an American organization. And let me just explain that for all the American organizations, our concern is not about the actual goals and trying to create diversity, equity, inclusion. It's really the responsibility we have to our members in the organization, to the financial aspects of the organization, to make sure that it can continue to conduct. And in my organization, we're trying to reflect this greater society in terms of what our organization looks like. So we're, as everyone knows, in aerospace, it's a challenge, particularly for women, to have the kind of equal representation that we want to see. How do you guys view it as not Americans, as coming from international backgrounds, how international organizations should be now working with American partners? Because American partners now, for a lot of reasons, have to be very cautious about how they speak about these topics. How do they still pursue the goals of trying to be diverse, of trying to be more inclusive, but knowing that their government members may not be allowed to participate in your events, they may not be allowed to contribute to the event because under federal regulations they may be excluded from doing that to an organization that actively promotes diversity. How do you see that? How do you think we should work on that topic? I know it's a huge challenge, but it's happening now in real time, right? In the last 2 months.
That's a good question. I would ask you the same thing, to be honest, because we've been struggling with this a lot lately. As you know, we work with the U.S. a lot, specifically with the agency, but a lot of also different government entities. I mean, Clay, you were at Satellite and also at SGX. We spoke a bit. We had entire panels dropping out. We had government-related panels. Not a single speaker could come. They were quite literally not allowed to come and speak, even though they wanted to come, and we had prepared the entire panel, or let's say the entire programming, which was very, very unfortunate. And then when you look down, let's say organizations or agencies, it's extremely hard to work with them right now because as a nonprofit organization or an NGO, you're directly affected when you're receiving funding from them. Your funding is not only at risk, but may not be existing anymore purely because an organization for students, young professional may be seen an organization that is only related to diversity, which is the case, but that's not the only purpose of the organization. So it's extremely hard right now because everybody is walking on ice. The people working in those, let's say, government organizations are working on ice. We are working on ice because we don't know what you said, what type of wording to use, because certainly right now, certain wording that we used in the past, even to apply for grants, cannot be used anymore. And it's just such an uncertain time that doesn't only puts us at risk, but also these partners that we're working with, because programs that they were before executing can no longer be executed. They're losing a lot of traction, at least within the ecosystem and within the space sector, purely because they cannot be talking about certain initiatives. So I would say I really have no good answer right now as to how to do this, because we are, for one, trying to figure it out, and it's kind of day by day. I mean, I keep receiving emails that every day is something different. There's a new thing you can't say, a new thing you should do, new bureaucracy, new documentation. It's really trying to stay on top of it and do the best you can, because I feel that, again, my personal opinion, when we start talking about this, we get so stuck with the language and with the words, and we don't see the bigger picture. Like when you're talking about an organization like even SGAC and IAF and AIAA, it's not just about what, I don't know, that statement says or what you release in the media. It's about the people in those organizations. So that funding you're stopping because, I don't know, somewhere in the text the word diversity is mentioned. You're technically affecting scholarships for hundreds of people who are now not going to have that opportunity just because of that single word. And I mentioned that earlier on the ethical conundrum. Is it better to then just remove the word so you get the funding and create those opportunities, or kind of take a stance and keep talking about it, but then not have these opportunities within your organization? And I think that's something that leaders are struggling with a lot right now, especially because for NGOs and nonprofits, a lot of funding would come from the US. So a lot of us are having to consider that and think about it. And it's a really difficult one to answer. I really don't have a good question because we're still in the process of figuring it out.
So to answer your question, so as maybe many of you are aware, I was born and raised in the U.S. So to see these changes is very heartbreaking, honestly, because the U.S. for the longest time was trying to make significant progress in these areas and to be inclusive in all fronts. And to see these extreme changes, my concern is how is that going to impact the space industry, which is not even where it needs to be. And so the question becomes, the culture exists in terms of inclusivity and diversity within organizations, but now the departments are being dismantled. The concept is being removed from the culture of organizations. But the people that are there currently could potentially stay for the next 20 years. And those 20 years are, and I don't know how long this is going to last. Probably with the new administration, things are going to change. But the main issue I have is what is the dramatic impact associated with this 4 years of this regression, in my opinion. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself, because I think this is regressive. It's not moving forward. It's actually curtailing progress that has happened. And the question becomes, are you creating a culture in which inclusivity is no longer desired? And how is that going to hurt the space community? How is that going to hurt innovation in the future? And to me, those are the critical elements that can define or destroy innovation as a result of non-inclusivity, whether it's of ethnic backgrounds, male, female, gender-related, or even geographic aspect. The second element, even, we want to have the U.S. participate in discussions. For example, at my committee, a lot of U.S. representation cannot participate in the committee, which is heartbreaking, because in some of the meetings we've had, we had some great discussions of initiatives that were implemented and how they were executed, and they did phenomenally. And we want to borrow from these successful initiatives to ensure diversity in space on a global scale. And so we wanted to take some of these lessons learned. Now, we don't have that opportunity anymore. And that's very heartbreaking. So I think my concern is the negative impact it will have, and how long is that negative impact going to last? And could it create a culture in which the new generation of individuals are no longer interested in diversity and inclusion? So that's really where my concern is.
It's okay to fight for words, but it's most important, we want to fight for real actions. And so happened, I was the chair of the staff of ESTEC, and at that time we made an analysis that it's not for justice that we wanted to increase diversity, just for efficiency, for having more social benefit for all, economic advantage. So this could be also argument we could use now, because diversity maybe sometimes was overplayed, and it led to some minor excess, and then are used now to go against it. But what I see in your platform, you have diversity, you have equality, also very important, equality of access to knowledge, access to experience, and you have international platform. And that's where we, as IF, can help each of the countries to keep this international dimension. If I quote US, I think it's e pluribus unum. How you make everything out of many different actors. That's on terms of the US, so that's something we could completely subscribe to. And within this platform, we have now some sensitivity to some words, but we have to show that above the words, the action that we conduct are going to benefit to society, to economy, to how we change the world. And so eventually we have to find a way to describe how we can act and not be too much focused on some words. In the case, there are also some words that are forbidden. Like, for instance, in France, some racistic, anti-Semitic words are forbidden. That's the law. So sometimes you have to adapt also to the national law, but you can find a bit the perspective which is applicable universally. So I wonder within IF he could try to maybe upgrade a bit our idea in this sense of initiatives that we take, and that are applicable for the various members.
It's on? Yeah.
It's on. Yeah. I'm Luisella Giulicchi. I'm working at the European Space Agency, but I'm also president of Women in Aerospace Europe. I really appreciate it and share all your insightful discussion and consideration. Now, in a situation of difficulties, we are in a situation of difficulties as, let's say, champion in diversity and gender equality. In each difficulties, there is an opportunity. And so also from what you were saying, perhaps it's the time to revise our narrative, which is not just a narrative, is what is meant for diversity, which means many different things for many different organizations, and consequently, actions are very dispersed, if you want. So maybe it's a time for a collective reflection on what means diversity, what we want to focus and work on. And so, yeah, this is what you think, because it sounds like you have been as well the same difficulties in dealing with organization, especially organization in the US right now. So perhaps we have to find a way actively. So.
Yeah, I think it is already a time of collective reflection, considering the fact that we're all here at this very early time, having this conversation. In some ways, this is a collective reflection. And I like what you said. Sometimes in times of difficulties, you find certain opportunities or certain things that you haven't otherwise seen before. I think it's no secret that a lot of, let's say, industry and government organizations are losing partners, they're losing funding, they're losing traction with a lot of the projects that they have been doing, including us, of course. We're losing, let's say, I want to say strength in some of our US initiatives, but that may be creating opportunities in other regions. So we're actually really making a shift towards the Middle East and trying to establish something there, which goes towards the benefit of another aspect of diversity, which is really diversifying our presence and not just having very much events focused on already established regions. Of course, we hold about, I would say, 27 to 30 conferences per year in all regions of the world, but we're trying to create more global initiatives in more underrepresented and diverse regions, which I think really, I would say, I don't want to say the pressure of that, but the stronger initiative for that came from that push and kind of seeing like, okay, we should not be relying so heavily on the US ecosystem. We need to make sure we diversify and have presence so that, you know, SGAC as an organization doesn't lose traction because of a single decision. So I think you're right in what you're saying, that there are certain opportunities, but that's not to undermine the, I would say, difficulties that a lot of organizations and industry and even agencies are having to deal with with right now. And I would even say specifically agencies. We are, you know, having heads of agencies panel, different conversations, workshops. So we get to interact with them, and I see again this scrutiny on people, and I would say the pressure each head of agency has on their shoulder, but also each leader to kind of fix things internally for their organization, but at the same time be promoting the right values. So yes, there are opportunities, but it's also a very difficult time that I think not a single leader would have an extensive and detailed answer in how to navigate that.
Yeah, good morning to all. Actually, I have a direct, simple question. See, the presently any industry, especially space industry, which is in a evolution, evolving stage, you know, the primary aim, sole aim, front stage is only getting profit, not other things, whether diversity or anything. That has gone to backstage. Front stage is only getting profit. So in that situation, how to manage, how to come out with the diversity, inclusiveness, etc. What we can do it.
If the bottom line is the main outcome, the good news is the more diverse your organization is, the higher the chance of innovation. And so there have been studies, and I think there was a McKinsey study, if I recall, in which they saw organizations that have the highest diversity actually increased by 19% their bottom line. So if you're really driven by money, then this is a great example of that study. I think it was done in 2019 or 2020, I can't recall. So there is a direct correlation to diversity and making money. So I think a lot of organizations can capitalize on that and increase their bottom line. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, just a quick question, please. I'm a historian, so I try to look at things from the past, present, and the future. This is a pendulum swing. It's a swing to the reaction of the last 4 years, clearly. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken with in leadership positions that felt that the burden of diversity was stifling for their company. I can tell you this antiseptically, without an opinion. I don't have a value judgment. I can tell you from the point of view of filling out college applications with my son that I was amazed, because ultimately, and probably most people here believe, that one should receive a position or advance based on merit. And I think that's the key. And the way the market forces are, there are more women in university in the United States than there are men. There's a need of a job force, a workforce. So it's natural that people who are capable by merit will get positions. By enforcing words, by having these onerous, I've been told, meetings to try to change people's minds, which many people were calling a form of brainwashing. So, look, people should advance based upon their abilities, not because of what they look like, not because of what they do at home. It takes time. Think of what has taken place in the United States. I don't know where you're from, but since the end of World War II. It's amazing. So patience. Merit will win out.
So I must disagree with you on that because, for example, so I was born and raised in the U.S., worked in the U.S. all my life. And I have, in the aerospace industry, experienced that I have to work 4 times as hard, and I have the same, if not better merit than my colleague who's a male. And my male colleague gets recognized for the work that I did to support the fact that he couldn't do half his work. And this is experience that I had personally. So even when you have merit, sometimes the system and the culture within an organization is flawed. So I am, as a matter of fact, I'm the one who created all the codes for that particular project in order to make it more robust, fast responses. And in the end, it was my colleague who got to recognize, not me, which makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I wanted to. I know we have to close, but I'll add a final remark on here. I would have to say that I also I see some of your point, but fundamentally disagree with it. I understand what you're saying. People have to be getting jobs, be getting certain opportunities based on merit. But a lot of people will ask you, how do you measure merit, and do you consider potential in that merit? I gave an example with scholarships earlier in the panel. If you're having somebody from, let's say, an emerging space region versus an emerged one, they're going to be having significantly different background in terms of experience, in terms of opportunities, in terms of things that they were able to do to advance their career, and that's a fact. If you're in the US, you have the opportunity to go to the greatest universities in name, let's say, ones that are recognized worldwide, and if you're, again, in Bulgaria, you do not, unless you have a lot of funding to do that. So you also have to recognize the aspect of potential. And I also use myself as an example. When I was, being interviewed for my position, I did really didn't have a lot of background in space. I didn't have the relevant experience. I think I was, there were candidates, at least later on I found out that I was like, well, why did you even select me? They had much better CVs, much better backgrounds. And a lot of, let's say, the mentors whom I've been talking about have told me, potential is one of the most important things you need to look in a candidate. And I think that's a huge aspect of merit. You need to consider their potential. And of course, that's not something you can predict exactly, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, not just basing things off paper, but also considering the person's potential, specifically considering, let's say, the different opinions they might have and how that might impact a certain organization or a certain project.
So thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you for your engagement. I think we had some really cool discussions, some heated ones, maybe a little bit. But I think overall, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was insightful for all. And I wish you a great spring meeting. Thank you.